Today's episode of the Australian Lawn and Garden Podcast is brought to you by Toro Australia, and more specifically their new 60-volt Revolution Professional battery tool lineup. If you're interested in that, more about it later in the podcast. Thank you, Toro Australia. All right, welcome to today's episode of the Australian Lawn and Garden Podcast. I have been asked this question so much lately. So many people have been coming to me saying, I want to hire an employee. I want to hire a full-time employee, not an off-sider thing. I want them unsupervised. How do I go about that? How do I do this in a way that's profitable? How do I avoid the pitfalls? And the reality is, I have talked about this quite a bit on the podcast, but I have never actually sat down and done a super deep dive into the numbers, like a real thorough look into exactly what is needed to have a successful business in this area. And so what we're going to do today, we're going to get a spreadsheet up. I'm going to chuck on the screen right now. You can download this yourself. We're going to go through all sorts of numbers. There's multiple pages here. This is the most detailed I've ever been in a podcast. Like, this is the most prepared I've ever been for a podcast because it just took that long to get ready for this. Take it off the screen now. But you can download this and you can run through this with me. It might look like it's complicated. It does take a while to explain, but there isn't a single business owner who is doing pretty good stuff in this industry. Like, if you're successful as a solo operator, you can definitely understand this. It might seem complicated. Hopefully we explain it. The idea is we do this spreadsheet together. You can listen to this as you're working. I'm going to try and explain it as much as possible, but the goal is that, you watch this. We do video on Spotify and YouTube, but you can watch this. You can run through it. You can download the spreadsheet. You do the numbers together, and it's almost like it's a coaching call. It's almost like we're working together, and I'm trying to speak to you as I would speak to my 21-year-old version of myself. I started my business at 19. At 21, I hired my first full-time employee, and I made a bunch of mistakes. And so me now at 31, I'm going back 10 years talking to him and seeing what I can do to prevent the issues that I had. And it will blow some of your minds, some of the math we're about to get into, and how detrimental certain moves are to the business, how expensive it is to run some employees, and how there's certain things that you can spend a lot of money on that will actually save you a lot of money. So we're going to get into that soon. Before we get into that, I've got three things. There are three bad reasons to hire an employee. Like I said, I'm talking to 21-year-old version of myself. If I was having a coaching call with you right now, this is what I'd say before we get into numbers. There are three bad reasons to hire employees. Number one, you are overwhelmed or overbooked. Number two, you feel like you're turning away great opportunities. And number three, you want the status of having a team of employees. If you tick any of those boxes, even just a little bit, proceed with caution. If you tick them a lot, you may need to fix the problems that are happening there first. I'm going to show you that in a second, before you even get into these numbers. Because it doesn't matter what you do with those numbers, there are some other problems that are going on first. So you feel overwhelmed or overbooked. Well, there's two. The problem with hiring an employee to fix this, and this is not a feeling you want to ignore, right? You don't want to ignore an overwhelmed, overbooked, burnout will come. Lots of problems will come. But the problem is, we're not asking you to ignore it. It's just that the hardest way to solve that problem is hiring employees. You talk to so many people in the industry and they say the hardest thing to do is find a great employee. So if you're overwhelmed and overbooked, why would you then take on the additional challenge of the hardest thing to do in the industry by most people's estimation? So if that's the case, all right, there are two ways. I'm going to just cover this very quickly. There are two ways to solve the overwhelmed, overbooked problem without hiring someone. Number one, raise your prices. If you've never done this before, definitely raise your price. If you're doing 50, 60 hours a week and you want to do 40, you have a massive opportunity to raise your prices very high. Typically, it depends. It depends if you're undercharging and all sorts of stuff. But you can typically expect if you raise your prices by 20%, you're probably going to lose maybe 10 to 25% of your clients. But the reality is that you're going to be very similar in numbers in terms of income, if not more, with less work. And that's exactly what you want. So the first thing is raise your prices. When we do the math, I'll talk about this quickly. If you make 10% off an employee, you're doing pretty good. So think about this way. If you just want to make more money and you're hiring an employee, If you make 10% off them, let's say they do 150 grand a year, you're going to make 15 grand. What's easier, raising your prices 15 grand a year or getting 150 grand extra work, hiring somebody, managing them, doing twice as much admin because you're now doing twice as much work? You get the idea. Raising the price is easier. That's the first step. The second step is analyze your business to see where you are inefficient. Is your route inefficient? Is your scheduling inefficient? Do you have bad admin systems where you are forgetting things? You're slow to get your invoices paid, so you end up being very labor intensive with that. Are there ways that you can buy equipment or you can do whatever to make your job more efficient? Do those two things first. I can't get into them in too much depth. It would just be too long of a podcast. But that's the first thing. The second thing, you feel like you're turning away great opportunities. If you are turning away great opportunities, well, that's a problem. And you may be able to solve that with hiring an employee. But the key problem I'm talking about here is that you feel like you're turning away great opportunities. So many of us start a business. We're really hungry. We have this idea that we've got to get clients, and we're working so hard. We're pushing so hard. We're in this mental frame of mind, which is a great place to be when you're starting a business. Then you fill your books, and what happens? You don't change your frame of mind. And so you might be turning away jobs, and there's actually no problem with turning away jobs. That's a sign of a healthy business. A better solution to that would be all the great opportunities you have, maybe go and quote them. And if you win the great opportunities, the really nice houses, the high hourly rate services, instead of just ignoring them, drop your worst client. Win a great client, drop your worst client. The second thing is that you can calculate exactly how much, well, not exactly, but you can calculate fairly accurately how much money you are actually turning away by asking these questions. I'm going to be quick, but let's get into it. Are these consistent year-round opportunities, or is it just a peak season that you have? Are these opportunities you're getting aligned with your ideal client profile you actually have? Because sometimes, you know this, you rock up to a job, you think it's going to be great, the client is horrible. They have no budget, right? Or they want it cut every 6 months, and it's just not realistic for what they are wanting to achieve quality-wise. Some of these great opportunities, in inverted commas, are not that good. Of the great opportunities you are actually getting, of the ones you actually want, how many do you actually win when you quote anyway? Because if you're only winning 1 out of every 10 jobs, right, and you're getting 20 requests a week, well, you're only going to win 2 jobs a week. And out of those 2 jobs, how much money do you actually make from them? And is that even enough to support a new employee? These are the challenges that you've got to talk about. These are the things you've got to look at. We're going to go in depth on this. But if you are turning away great opportunities, then that is a good idea to start pursuing hiring somebody. But if you just feel like it and you haven't actually thought critically about that, then we have problems. I'm going to post these questions if you want to look at them in more detail in the description, so you can go spend more time looking at them in your own time. But the third thing is you want the status of having a team of employees. I was like this at 21, and I don't know if it was an enormous amount of my motivation, but it was enough of my motivation that it clouded my judgment at certain times when I should have made harder decisions. Just being frank with you, I liked the idea of having employees, and so I kind of persisted when I shouldn't. I stuck with things that I shouldn't. I didn't do the right thing because I was motivated by pride. And so many of us are in that stage. So many of us are making that mistake. And we don't want to admit it to ourselves. But if that is a part of your motivation, just be aware that that will cloud your judgment. You need to separate your feeling of success in your business with having an employee, because that has the risk of causing a lot of damage. So let's get into this now. Looking at getting a new battery tool lineup for your business this spring, have a look at the new Toro 60 volt Revolution Professional series. I recently had the opportunity to head down to the Brisbane headquarters of Toro, and I got my hands on some of these tools, and I can honestly say that there's some really well built tools. The Revolution series runs off the 60 volt Flex Force system, and it powers a whole range of tools, including line trimmer, hedge trimmer, blower, and the 21-inch heavy-duty 60-volt mower. The line trimmer and the hedge trimmer can be run through the onboard batteries, just like you would expect, but also through the backpack linkage, which means that if you have large commercial jobs, it lightens the load and makes it a much easier job for you. There are a lot of interesting innovations in this lineup, including a 6-port multi-charger that you can put on the wall, which is really useful if you're running and relying on a battery system. And like I said, there's a whole lineup of tools ready to go for your business on this platform. So if you want to find out more information, head to the Toro website. There's a link in the description, or to your local Toro dealer. Thank you, Toro, for sponsoring this part of the podcast. How to know that you're in a good position to hire an employee, the actual numbers that we're going to dig into. Here they are. You can see on the screen, this is a step-by-step guide to estimate your equivalent profit. And the reason why we're doing this is the very first step. If I'm talking to you as 21-year-old Luke, and I'm going through this process, the very first step, I would say, the number one thing is, are you currently making 20% profit, net profit, after all expenses, if you pay yourself as you would pay an employee? Most business owners do not focus on this number anywhere near as much as they should. You look at your total profit and your profit margin, let's say it's 80%, because you're not paying yourself a wage, right? You just got 20% of, say, operating expenses. And then now, you look at it, you think you're in a really healthy position. But the reality is that a lot of us, if we were to pay ourselves like an employee, may not even be profitable at all. And what that means is if we hired somebody who is likely slower than us, if we're breaking even as ourselves and we hire someone who's slower than us, we're going to lose money. So this is the first step. And we can calculate quite quickly what your actual profit margin is if you paid yourself like an employee, just like this. And take about a minute. The first thing you got to ask is, how many hours a week are you on the tools? In this example, I've written 40 hours a week. And the second question is, how much would a replacement wage be to hire somebody who was just to do your gardening hours? And I've written $40 an hour, but this is traveling between jobs, mowing the lawn, cutting the hedges, maybe a little bit of quoting, that side of the job. Not the admin, not the business decisions, not doing marketing or anything like that, just the gardening stuff. So I've put down 40 hours a week at $40 an hour. I've automatically calculated superannuation or workers' comp, and at the total at the bottom, it's gone. The total wage cost is $1,864. And by the way, you only need to fill in the areas that are not bold. The bold areas are automatically going to calculate. You can see if I change this to 20, you can see it changes those things. Then the next two questions, and this is the only two questions we have, and it's going to give us the answer, is how much business expenses has I had over the last 6 months? We want to remove any wage-related expenses from that. So if you're a solo operator, no problem. Literally just take your expenses and we chuck them in. Let's say it's $40,000. I've already put that in. And the next question is, how much revenue in sales have you made over the last 6 months? And this has to be over 6 months. We can't do it over 2 months, 3 months, because it's not enough of a data set to give you reliable information. So over 6 months, I've done, in my example, $110,000. And that's given me an estimated profit per week, if I was to replace myself with an employee, of 19.58%. And that is right in the target that I want. But I can change some of these numbers, and you can do that. You can put your own numbers. Let's say my expenses are $55,000 over the last couple of years. Over the last 6 months, I'm now down to 6% profit. Let's say my expenses were $30,000, right? But my turnover was only $85,000. My profit is 7.69%. So before you take any further steps, and this was where some of you might need to, you might want to keep listening for educational purposes, but in the process of hiring an employee, right, you've done those 3 steps, you get to this, your profit is not enough, you need to go raise your prices. There is no point in hiring anybody right now. And the reason is that, like I said, you may hire somebody, and if you're making 7.69% like this, if they are 8% slower than you, which is highly likely, you're highly likely to, especially early on when they need training, they're going to be much, much slower than that. But even when they get up to speed, they're probably going to be slower than you, which means if you gave them those jobs that you were doing, you're going to have to pay them for more hours than you've estimated. You might need to pay them, say, 44 hours, and bam, your profit's gone right down. That was 2%. So I say 48 hours, they say they're quite a lot slower. You're now losing money from that person. And you can calculate all this. You can play around with this. Again, you can download this. This is why I'm making it as helpful as possible. So the first thing is you want to do that. And the why 20%? Well, the reason why I say 20% is 10% in my mind should be the minimum you should be targeting for employees. You are going to have inefficiencies like we just talked about. They're going to be slower. And so 20% is a healthy starting point, at least a healthy starting point for you to go and hire an employee. If you're making 30%, fantastic. I'm not saying it's like 20 and that's it. The higher, the better. But my personal advice would be if you are making less than that percent-wise, I would not go and hire an employee because there is a chance that they're going to be slower, less efficient. There's going to be more things go wrong, more hidden expenses. And if you're working with 15 or 10 or 5% profit, you are not going to make any money, or highly unlikely, I should say, to make money with an employee. The other thing is just reiterating, profit should be consistent for several months, ideally 6 to 12, and not based on a single great season. The other thing I want to say is don't forget that we are just calculating these numbers off your current expenses. Uniforms, onboarding costs, potential downtime, new equipment that you need. Hiring an employee is going to come with so many additional costs. So don't look at your numbers with too much pride if you think they're really good, because you may get a reality check when you start going to the further stages of this calculation. The next thing, so what we've done is we've gotten rid of the problems that we talked about, those first two things. We've got our profit to 20%. Let's say we've got our profit to 20%. The next thing we want to understand is cash flow. Cash flow kills businesses just as much as profitability. So you might ask, what is cash flow? Cash flow is like the movement of money in and out of your business, right? So ignore profitability. It's essentially how many invoices are getting paid versus how many bills that you have, right? Because if you're getting, let's say you're doing $10,000 a week in work, but you're only getting $1,000 a week worth of invoices paid. If you have $8,000 a week worth of bills, you're in a really, really, really bad place, even though you should be making $2,000 a week, right? The numbers should be doing that. You're not, because in reality, you're operating at a loss. So I've given an example here. Here's what happens to a business that does $6,000 a week at sales and has a 10% profit margin. You might be looking at that going, that should be a very successful business. It's $600 extra a week that you should be making. However, if 70% of the bills are paid on time, 10% are 1 week late, 10% are 2 weeks late, and the final 10% are 4 weeks late, okay? And that is what a lot of you probably are experiencing right now. You can see here that it means that in reality, if you started off with that, you would feel like you are losing money. Your actual cash in your bank account would feel like you're losing money for 7 weeks. It says 13 on the side because that's the cells, but if you counted the weeks, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's the 8th week when you feel like you've made $600, which is what you should have earned in the first week. So if you are the sort of person who's about to hire an employee, you need all that money. You got to have to pay the wages. You can't be late on things like that. You can't be late on super, on your tax, and all that sort of stuff. And a lot of people get into trouble with that, and it's a real problem. So if you are the sort of person who is very relaxed on your payment terms, you're allowed to do that. Well, you have been allowed to do that because you don't have a massive number of expenses. But as soon as you hire someone, those expenses go up. You have far less profit to work with. And if you do not get on top of your payments like this, you're going to have so many problems. So we're starting to build a strategy. You should not hire somebody if you don't have 20% profit margin to start with as an equivalent, because you're going to get problems. And you should not hire somebody if your cash flow reflects something like what I've just talked about, because you're going to have problems. And this is not a guess. It's math. We're just talking about math here. The other thing that I haven't talked about is how many people, if you're really bad on collecting payments, how many people just don't pay? What goes on with that? It's not uncommon for you to lose 2, 3, 4, 5% sometimes. And if I added that to this, it would extend out the negative cash flow, the negative numbers in the bank account for even longer. We need every bit of that cash. So make changes. What can you do? Well, you can start using administrative software systems. You can start doing things like prepayment or even deposits on certain big services. We do prepayment on all of our packages. They're monthly packages, so we can get away with that. A lot of people can't if you're doing once-off services or things like that. Credit cards on file, so you can charge them 24 hours after the service is done. Even hiring an administrator who can do this job for you will likely be a better business decision and have more money in your account than you realize. The thing that a lot of people say is they don't take this serious because they feel like the client will eventually pay, and so it'll all work out. But the problem is that it doesn't quite work that way. Sometimes they don't pay, but the stress that is caused by not having enough money ultimately makes so many other sort of flow-on effects that is just not worth even going down this path with employees. So things like you start underquoting jobs out of desperation. Like somebody comes to you and they say, "Oh, look, I know it's a $600 job. You said 600, but would you do it for 450 cash?" Well, you're like, "Oh, I need the cash." Yes. Well, if you're only making 10% profit margin, 540 was your minimum price you could afford. You're losing money on that job. And you go, "Well, I'll take the hit because I need the $450. It's like, well, hold on a second. Surely it would just be better to start chasing up payments. Instead of spending a couple of hours doing that job, spend a couple of hours chasing up payments. Surely it'd be better to spend that time doing that. But we don't think that way, and we start underquoting jobs out of desperation. We can't start taking on services we know we shouldn't, services that might maybe damage equipment, super overgrown staff. We start rushing services because we want to fit more in a day. We even start buying smaller quantities of things at higher prices. Instead of bulk buying things and to make it more affordable, you are making it more suitable to your cash flow. And that may not be the thing that destroys your business, but these accumulate. But the most important thing when you're hiring an employee is that you need to check your emotional side, because you are going to have to critique them. You're going to have to lead them. You're going to have to give them a negative word every now and then, unless you hire the perfect employee, which potentially may happen, but the odds are that it won't. And it'll be very unwise of you to plan for the perfect conditions. And so if you are stressed out financially because you have all these bills that you're trying to cover and your cash flow is bad, and then your employee makes a mistake and you snap at them maybe a little bit more than they deserved because of the stress, and they don't know the stress, they don't see the stress, and trust me, I'm not judging you. We would all be in that place. I'm not trying to make you feel bad about that, but I'm just saying, if that's the case, what if you lose respect with an employee because of your cash flow? What if you lose a great employee? Even worse. Fix your cash flow. Just because the people will eventually play and it eventually works out over 9-10 weeks, no. Fix your cash flow. Help your stress. So now we're into the crux of it. This is the step-by-step guide that we're going to look through to work out exactly how you can afford to hire an employee. If you've gotten through everything, you're very close. Your cash flow is good. You're making 20% profit. You're now close. However, you are also so far from having this work out. It surprises people a lot. It's so surprising to people when they start seeing some of these numbers. But what we are going to do is we're going to go through the wage expenses. We're going to work out the revenue you need. We're going to work out how many clients you need to support that, how you can transition to get those clients, how you can do it in a profitable way, and exactly how long you should predict it will take to become profitable and how to prepare for that with your savings. And then what we can do is we can reverse engineer how you set up your business so that you can do this quickly, efficiently, and save a lot of money. Because what we're going to show is the way that people do this a lot of the time is just set up to fail, even if you have those other two things right. Like I said, you might feel like you are so close, but you are so far. You need to get this stuff right now. So let's get into it. The first thing we've got, I've pre-filled some of this information. Again, you can go and do this yourself with your on your own computer. We can do it together. Like I said, this is trying to be like a coaching session. What we want to do is the first thing you want to do is go back to working out your wages. Now I've got $1,600 a week because that is what we put in before. 40 hours at $40 an hour, $1,600 a week. Again, it's working out superannuation and workers' comp from that, and your total wage cost is $1,864 like it was last time. So let's get into the numbers. What we need to do is how much revenue do we need to support $1,864 a week? And the answer is somewhere between 2 to 3.5 times wages. If you go on the internet, a lot of people say it's 3 times wages or it's 30% of your total revenue should be this. By the way, all the numbers that I'm spitting out here, these are not including GST. GST is something that you would add on top of all this. So what we're looking at is most people are saying 30% or 3 times, 30% of total revenue or 3 times wages should be your revenue target. I think it's a great guide, but the lawn care industry is so varied with what the different business models that 2 to 3.5 times is the range I'd give. If you have a very, very low hourly rate, you should have a higher so you should be going for the high rate here, 3.5 times wages. If you're going like, oh, well, I charge $60 an hour and I can pay $30 an hour. No. It doesn't quite work out that way because the costs that you have are going to be so much higher as a percentage. If you charge a lot of money, like you're charging, say, $200 an hour, well, you can go a 50-50 split. You could pay someone $100 an hour and you could still have $100 an hour to cover your expenses, right? So the higher you charge, right, the less the percentage needs to be. It gets a bit complicated in this, but this is just a range that we want it to be in. Somewhere between 3,700 and 6,500 is the range that you'd want to have to pay an employee $40 an hour for 40 hours a week. And then what we can do is we can reverse engineer and start making some strategies on how do we hit those revenue targets that you have. And here's how we're going to work it out. We're going to work it out in this example just from regular clients. And the reason is that regular clients are the backbone of a full-time position. If you have a contract or you have a good, healthy list of regular clients, you know that you can support that. You're not going to lose 50% of your clients overnight. But if you have a lot of one-off services, it's a much more stressful business. This math would still work with one-off services, like you can put in a $20,000 service that you do once per year for a client because landscaping business, and all the math will still work out. But I want you to calculate this off regular stuff because, again, if I was to coach you, I would say if you're in the lawn care industry, in the garden maintenance industry, I'll be basing my decisions off regular work. It's a less stressful business. So what we've done is I want you to put in the average service price for a regular client. And this example, I've done $120 per cut. And the average services per year, I've done 21 services per year, which is fortnightly from September through to April and monthly from May, or 4-weekly from May through to August. That's roughly what it is, 20, 21, 22. So what we look at here is we can then work out, well, how much are they worth? And then how many clients do you need to support your revenue targets? And so in this case, at $120 a cut at 21 services a year, I need 76 to 34 clients to get that. And what I've done here is down the bottom is we can now calculate what our transitional period will look like. And I've got some very unflattering numbers here. I have what percent of extra target turnover do you already have? What that means is if you're currently doing 40 hours a week and you want to put somebody else on for 40 hours a week and you want to work yourself, you have zero work to give to them because you need to do that 40 hours yourself. If you had 60 hours a week that you're doing, you could give them 20 straight away. You have 50% of the work. But I've started off terribly here because I want to show a point. We currently have 0% of the work that we need to give to an employee. And we have one new regular client averaging $120 a week coming in per week. Well, the maths is very simple. How many clients do you need? I need 76 to 134. I'm getting one a week. That means it's going to take me 76 to 134 weeks to fill their schedule. Very simple maths here. But here's where it starts getting expensive. you have to cover personally the revenue needed to run your business, because you're going to have to pay their wages. There's going to be additional costs that are going to be involved with them working. And so out of your bank account is going to have to fund that transitional period. And because you have no starting work and you're only getting one client a week, that transitional period is 76 to 134 weeks, which means you are going to have to pay $143,000 to $250,000 in the interim as you are transitioning. Now, nobody out there is going to do that. Like nobody is sitting there going, I filled my books and I get one new regular client a week. Time to hire, right? But the point is, I'm showing you that as an extreme case because we can start bringing that down. But a lot of people, it's a lot worse than what they think. So let's say you've got, well, actually, there's one more cost. Let's do this one more cost first. What about equipment? Equipment costs. Let's say you need new equipment. So are you going to have a full setup? Are you just going to buy a couple of extra mowers and have them work with you in your setup? Well, if you start off with just a couple of extra mowers, let's say you're going to spend $10,000 on equipment because you got, maybe it's a bit high. Let's go $5,000 on equipment. I've set this up for equipment costs to be financed. It's going to tell you to put down a 20% deposit. Now, financing $5,000, probably not necessary in this scenario. You probably just pay the $5,000, but I've really set this up for greater expenses. What we have at the bottom here is we've calculated everything. And again, we're going to get back to some more sensible numbers here, but I'm just showing you how the spreadsheet works. At the bottom here, it's going to tell you how long will it take to recoup the startup costs that you have, because it's going to take you 76 weeks to 134 weeks at this slow growth rate to just get to your revenue targets. Then when you get to your revenue targets, you're going to make 10% profit at my estimate at the low rate, and you're going to make 20% profit as I estimate at the high rate. It's going to take you 464 to 327 weeks just to make the profit that you spent, make enough profit to cover the costs that you spent to set up your business. Now, obviously, like I said, this is a ridiculous starting point, but let's start working these numbers and working them back, because my hope is that this starts getting you an idea of how to set up your business to have success. So let's change this number to something more realistic. Let's say you've already got 20% of the work you need, and you're getting 3 new regular clients a week. So it's pretty good growth. You're doing pretty well. That cuts it down a lot. It's a more realistic number. You're going to spend $5,000 on equipment. You're putting down a 20% deposit of $1,000. Again, you can modify this and get rid of the finance side of it if you wanted to. I'm going to use that later on when we put more money down. But even at that, what we have here is we have $30,000 to $53,000 needed to support an employee in that transitional period, because it's at 3 clients a week. It's still going to take you 20 weeks to bridge the gap, even if you're starting with 20% of the work. And this is where so many people get stuck. They go, I'm doing 50 hours a week. Well, 48 hours a week would be 20% of 40 hours. So I'm doing 48 hours a week. I'm a bit overworked. I get so many requests, right? I'm getting 3 a week, maybe getting 10 calls a week, and that means you win 3 clients a week. So you feel like you're getting a lot of work, and you go and hire somebody, and you have no idea that it's going to take you 20 weeks of growth at that rate just to hit your full-time revenue target. At best, 35 weeks on the high end. And so we need to be more strategic with how we work these things out. And again, this is not how long it's going to take you to recoup all your costs. It's 105 to 77 weeks to recoup all your costs. It's just taking you 20 to 35 weeks just to hit your revenue targets. I hope this starts making sense. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go through this again, and I'm going to make a business that is much, much, much more successful at transitioning this period from my experience. I'm going to show you the things that you can tweak. And the main one here is advertising, believe it or not. But we're going to tweak some things, and we're going to make a business that can have a transition in about 12 weeks. 12 weeks, cut your costs right down. That's the goal, because I think that's realistic. Having it shorter than that is technically possible, and there are ways you can go about it. But at least 12 weeks is the maximum that I would do. So we're not going to change our wages. $1,600 a week is our wages. We're not going to change our target revenue, and we're not going to change the regular client pricing that we have. It's still $120 per client at 21 clients. But what we are going to do, instead of having someone go on full-time first up, the most obvious move you have, well, there's a couple. The first most obvious move you have is to get casual employees, even if they're inefficient, even if you don't actually make money off them. Say you break even off them. Right, what I mean by this is, let's say you have an employee, let's say you're doing $1,000 a day on your own, just for some nice round numbers. You hire an employee for $200 a day, and all of a sudden you're only doing, say, $250 more, and you're paying for extra fuel and a few extra things. And you realize, I'm not making any money from this employee. Okay, that's not great. I'd prefer that you were making money, but you are still doing 25% more work. And what that means is that you've gotten a little bit further. So when you do hire a full-time employee who should be efficient, who should be working out that sort of stuff, you are getting closer. So what you want to do is you want to make it, hopefully you are making money. You want to make it so that you're at least 50%, at least halfway there. Because as you're going to see, that's going to cut down the estimated times to hit your revenue from 20 to 35 to 12 to 22. Now, this is just hitting revenue. This is not profitable. We're still 47 to 39 weeks until we have recouped all of our startup costs. But what we really want, so 50% at minimum, because there are ways to shorten this. If you're currently getting 3 new clients a week, the second lever you can pull, the first is hiring casual employees until you're at 50% at least. The second lever you can pull is advertising. Because what you're going to find, this surprises a lot of people, the more money you spend on advertising, even expensive advertising, because it shortens the period where you are bridging the gap in that transitional period, you end up spending less overall dollars. Let's have a look at this. Your total savings needed here is calculated at the low rate and the high rate. And so all this numbers is there. What it is saying, again, for a $40 an hour, 40-hour a week employee, and we've got 50% of their work, it's going to cost me, with setup fees and everything, $12,000 to $21,000, or $13,000 to $22,000 actually, when you round them up, $13,000 to $22,000 to set that business up. I'm going to now put some advertising costs in. But those advertising costs are going to increase the clients that I win per week, thus decreasing the total savings I need to bridge the gap. Let's have a look at this. Let's say a new regular client costs me $100 a client. And you might be able to get it for less, but I'm going to go expensive or more expensive here. $100 a regular client is going to cost me $3.8 to $6.7 thousand to get the clients that I need, because that's calculating on how many clients I need to bridge the gap. But if that can take me, so it's currently boosted my numbers up here. But to balance out the spreadsheet, what I need to do is I need to take the number of regular clients I've won. Let's say I can double it. Instead of getting 3 new regular clients a week, I can get 6 new regular clients a week. Put that number in there, and bam, you can see straight away you've gone from $13,000 to $22,000 down to $10,000 to $18,000. So spending 3.8 to 6.7 in this fake example. But in this analogy, spending $3,000 to $6.7 thousand in advertising saves you so much more money in the transitional period, covering the costs, that it is worth it to do it. Even if I go to $150 per client, but I'm now getting, say, 8 clients a week, I'm now down. Well, that number's not quite working out. Let's go, I'm getting 10 clients a week at that rate. Again, well, this is the good thing about it. You can work out exactly how many clients, or at what rate. I'm going to finesse these numbers. If I go to 140 and I'm getting 10 clients a week, I'm getting $5,000 to $9,000 in total advertising spend. But my total transitional period is costing me basically 10 to 17 grand. So you can finesse these numbers. Imagine what you could do if you could get your costs down to $30 per customer acquired. That's when you start really cooking with gas, and that's when these numbers start getting quite low. But here's the strategy you want to look at. How can I bridge that transitional period with casual employees, even if I'm not making much money with them? Hopefully you are, but even if the profit on them is low because they're slow, they're inefficient, maybe this isn't their passion. Like we're talking about, say, like a university student who is not a physical worker, and they're just not fast, and they frustrate you. But hey, you want to hire someone in the future. Maybe what you do is is you do both. You replace them with someone who's better, and then you go and hire somebody who's great in the future. But the point I'm getting at is, even if you're not making money off them, and you should, I want you to, but even if you weren't, it still saves you money in the transition period. But here's some goals. Here's what I really say as my goal. I'd be saying that you want 70% of the turnover that you need to be done, to be ready to go prior to hire somebody. I think you want to get about 8 new clients a week, and you want to have your new client acquisition costs at about $40 per client. And that will, at these rates, have you recoup your startup costs at the low rate in 12 weeks and at the high rate in 6.22 weeks. What that means, your entire business costs, so all the advertising, all the setup fees, and all the equipment, and this is with someone who is working with you, so you have very low extra expenses for them. You don't really need to buy any new mowers, maybe a new lawn trimmer here and there. If you are then going to expand them out into the industry, you have to go solo, you have a profit margin here of, at the low rate, $373 at 10%, and at the high rate, $1,300 a week at 20%. And so you're profiting somewhere in that range, $1,300 or $300 to $1,300. You then use that money over time to then buy the equipment that you need. Because if you were going to start out straight away investing $40,000 in that equipment, it's now going to take you 31 to 14 weeks. And that is the cash flow problem that we have in business. This is beyond the cash flow of not getting your money paid on time. This is the kind of picture that we're trying to paint. You can use these numbers to finesse and to, I guess, reverse engineer your goals. What wages can you afford? What rates are you really going to target? And again, if you work out what your target is for your business, you don't have to use the 2 to 3.5 wages range. You can literally just see how this says B7 times 2. You say, I want to do it by times 3. You can times it by 3. You can modify that if you want. I'm going to take it back. But you can finesse this spreadsheet. It's totally editable. Editable? Is that a word? Anyway, you can change it up how you like, and this is the goal. I want you to do these numbers before you ever even try to hire somebody. Because the problem is, if you get it wrong, it's going to take you 70, 80 weeks, like more than a year, just to recoup your startup costs. And what happens typically is, because of the stress, because of everything else that's going on, you end up resenting the fact that you have an employee, and you end up sacking them or moving on. They resent you because you're grumpy all the time, whatever it is. You end up not ever bridging that gap because it took so long and you were not profitable. I hope that's helping. I've got 2 more things that I want to say. Let me get back up here. Finding my notes. 2 more things that I want to say. This is going to be a reality check for a lot of people, and that's what I wanted. But there's 2 more things that are not even financial that you need to get right. Hopefully you've gone through this, you've worked out all the stuff, and you're at this stage. Let's say you're at this stage where you know what your strategy is. Still do not pull the trigger yet. There's 2 more things. The first is, you want your administration system systematized. And I would highly, highly, highly recommend you hire an admin assistant first. And you calculate that into your costs. And the reason is that when you hire somebody, your job is going to change from doing the job to helping other people do the job. And that is a massive increase in mental load. That mental load that you take on, the truth is that we only have the capacity to do a certain number of decisions a week. And what ends up happening, and I've been here, is your employee is going to ask you so many questions. And you know what? They should. That's the sign of a good employee. They're engaged. They want to know. They want to learn. But if you are answering all these emails and you're doing all this admin and you're chasing up payments and everything, you are going to be fried. And when they start asking you questions, again, you might be a little bit more grumpy than what you would normally be because you've just got too much going on in your head. Systematize your administration. Are there ways that you can have everything organized so that, like, the 80% organized by someone else, and there is, so that you don't have to worry about it? The way that you do that is you hire somebody who, well, is one way to do it. You can hire someone who's a stay-at-home, like a parent, stay-at-home mum, and just have them work 2 days a week. So 2 hours a day, so 5 days a week. They don't have to answer the phone all the time. right? You can have a missed call text back system like they do on Nexus Pro. You hang up on the call, it sends a text automatically. They can organize the text. They might be looking after kids at home. They might be busy all the time, but you just say, hey, look, can you check everything between, say, 12 and 1 and maybe 3 and 4? They send out the invoices. They do everything for you. You won't understand how much benefit that is. I talk to so many people. I recommend this, and this is a massive benefit of business in general, but it helps save so much of that mental load so that you can be more present with your employee. If anything is in your head and it's not documented, then it's likely that there will be something forgotten. A mistake will be made and it will be your fault. Even if the employee makes a mistake because you haven't given them the information, you haven't written it down, right? It's your fault. You need to take responsibility for that. I've had plenty of times where I've had a conversation with an employee. I've had that, 5 or 6 different pieces of information. They've remembered 4 out of 5. They forgot the 5th one and we had something go wrong. And I got frustrated. And then after time, I realized, hold on a second, I don't remember everything that people say to me in these conversations. When there's a lot of information, we need to write it down. Job notes on jobs, like training systems, we're going to get in a second, but having everything super, super detailed, get it off your head. And you might go, well, this is a process that's going to take me 6 months. Trust me, it'll be worth it. It will be worth it. Work every Saturday you need to get it set up. If you're someone who's like, I don't like software systems, I don't know what to tell you, man, because it is going to be so much harder to run a business without one. And what do you want me to say? Yeah, go ahead and do it. No, seriously, get a software system, bite that bullet, organize yourself properly. And the next thing and the final thing is your training system. You need to have a training system where the standards of every service are super clear. They're very well explained. And it doesn't have to be fancy. It just needs to be clear, right? They're two different things. You could literally have a system that's as simple as, say, a Google Doc, which has photos and text that explain everything you do. So you could have, say, like you take your spouse or a coworker or another contractor friend or your brother or whoever you've got. You say, hey, can you come along to a job with me? And I want you to take a photo or even a video of me doing different types. This is how I edge the lawn. This is how I mow the lawn. This is the standard we expect, when the lawn is finished. This is before, this is an after. And you put them all in and you describe. You go, our system is edge, blow, mow, blow, right? You write that out. You put that in there. And you have that Google Doc. Google Docs can be linked to say a service like, say, Sortscape. You have your job. They've got a mowing job. You have a link there. This is how we do the job. And every service that has that link, then they can click it if they want to. And if they don't click it and they don't look at it and they drop the ball, well, now it's no longer on you. It's on them, because you were clear and you have photos. Another great way of doing this would be, so unlisted videos on YouTube. You can upload videos to YouTube. Private or unlisted means that people can only access them if they have the link. Private is more secure, but unlisted is fine. You simply put them up there. You can put the link in again and have a time lapse or a video of it explaining it. It doesn't have to be well produced. It doesn't have to be the next lawn tips video. It just has to be something that is clear. Do every service that you do like that. Hedging, mowing, weeding, spraying. Hopefully they've got a chem cert, so they've got a lot of that explained, but everything in a document like that, have it as clear as possible so that when things go wrong, you've covered your backside. But the reality is less things will go wrong. The time you will spend and the money you will spend losing clients, chasing up on problems, sending people back is well worth the effort. And so let's summarize everything again, because we're coming to the end of this. There are 3 bad reasons to hire an employee. You're overwhelmed or overbooked. You feel like you're turning away great opportunities, or you want the status of having a team of employees. You need to work through those things first. Raise prices, systematize, then work out, are the opportunities you're turning away actually valuable, and get rid of any ego in your decision-making process. You don't need to hire employees to be successful in business. In fact, a lot of people are very successful without them. So get rid of that idea. The next thing you want to work out is you want to estimate your profit, and you want to make sure that's at least at 20% when you put in the equivalent numbers of having an employee. You then want to understand your cash flow and get it so that, I don't think I said this as clear as I could have before, but you want your target cash flow to be less than your profit margin. So if I'm making 10% profit, I want less than 10% late invoices. I want it to be that every week I can pay my bills on time. And so you need to work on that. Then you work through a strategy using this spreadsheet here that can work out exactly how you can make money as quickly as possible from your small business, from the employees that you have. And once you then have your profit at 20%, you then have your cash flow, right? And you have your strategy, you make your admin as systematized as possible, and you make a training system. Then you can go out and hire somebody. And hopefully you already have experience. You should have been hiring people as casuals to bridge that gap as much as possible. Maybe you can get to 100%. That would be fantastic. Maybe you can get your casuals. You have 2 different casuals. One does 2 days, one does 5 days. Then you hire full-time, right? But that's roughly a guide of a strategy. That's what I would tell myself if I was talking to my 21-year-old self. A few more notes. 1, if you're looking at this going, holy moly, this rate that you've got here, where I need to have 3 to 5 times, 2 to 3.5 times my wages. I was just getting that on the screen again. That number is so high. I have no idea how to charge that much a week for an employee. I'm super early in business. I'm struggling with this stuff. We made a full business called the Aussie Green Biz Mastery course. There's a link there. It's really for people who are starting out. If you're doing pretty well in business, like you're quite successful, you might find a few things of value, but it's not really made for that. If you're early in business, you're starting out, or you really struggle with the business side, jump on that. If you are in that second group of people where you were like, hey, look, I'm doing quite well. Like I'm quite good solo and I found this super, super helpful, but I still want some help with guidance. I still want to double check some stuff. Then you should go down the path of business coaching. There are a lot of business coaches out there. I use Darren Gallagher. He's been my business coach for a very, very long time, 5+ years. We've had him on the podcast. He might be a good suit for you. There might be somebody else, but don't do it alone. If you feel overwhelmed, go get help. Go get somebody to help you out with that. Work with an accountant, whatever you can. And the final thing is, a lot of the stuff that we're working out here with getting your numbers and all that is in the Moquo app. That sign behind me. The quoting is coming out so soon. I have the version. I have it on my phone, but we just need to get a few more things ready with that. So if you're interested in that, that's coming out soon. If you made it to the end of this, like the podcast on whatever platform you're on, subscribe, do all that sort of stuff. I don't usually ask for that, but that would be helpful. And everybody else, we'll see you in the next podcast.